They called her many names. To some, she was the Rose of the Empire, a woman of laughter and fire who brought joy to the most powerful man on earth. To others, she was a serpent, a schemer whose ambition left the Ottoman dynasty soaked in blood. But before she became Hurrem Sultan, before she became the wife of Suleiman the Magnificent, she was a girl in chains. Her life began not with silk and gold, but with fire, terror, and the iron grip of slavers. And from those ashes, she would rise to become one of the most feared and powerful women the world had ever seen. This is her story, a tale of power, love, and betrayal that would haunt an empire. Her name at birth was likely Anastasia or Alexandra Lisovska. She was the daughter of a humble Orthodox priest in what is now Ukraine, then a quiet borderland village under the Polish crown. For a time, her life was simple: fields to tend, a family to love, a faith to hold. But that quiet life was shattered in a single night when the riders came. Crimean Tatar slave raiders stormed through the village, their torches painting the sky red. Screams tore through the night as families were ripped apart, homes set aflame, and children bound in chains. Among the terrified captives was a girl with striking red hair, her young face lit not with tears, but with a stubborn fire that would one day shape history. She was dragged across the steppes to the Black Sea, where the city of Kaffa swelled with the misery of thousands. In its markets, human beings were bought and sold like cattle. Yet even here, among chains and cries, she stood out. Her hair, her wit, her spark. Merchants knew she was not for the fields. She was destined for Constantinople, the beating heart of the Ottoman world. And there, inside the vast walls of the imperial palace, her story began anew, renamed Hurrem, meaning the cheerful one. She carried a spirit that even slavery could not extinguish. She entered the palace harem, a gilded cage of luxury and fear, where the Sultan's concubines, his daughters, his sisters, and his mother lived in constant rivalry under the watchful eyes of eunuchs. Here beauty meant survival, wit meant advancement, and failure meant oblivion. It was Hafsa Sultan, mother of the young ruler Suleiman, who first noticed her. At around 15, Hurrem was presented as a gift to the Sultan, expected to be nothing more than a fleeting pleasure. But from the moment they met, she was unlike anyone he had ever known. She laughed easily, sparred with words, recited poetry, and spoke her mind with fearless honesty. Suleiman was captivated. Nights meant to be indulgences turned into conversations, laughter, and companionship. She became his favorite, a position both coveted and perilous. But her rise earned her enemies. Chief among them was Mahidevran, Suleiman's former favorite and mother of his eldest son, Mustafa. Their rivalry came to blows one day when Mahidevran struck Hurrem, leaving her face bruised and bleeding. Most women would have hidden their shame, but Hurrem turned humiliation into victory. When she appeared before the Sultan, battered but calm, her story was simple. She had been attacked. Her pain won Suleiman's sympathy, while Mahidevran's fury drove her further from favor. From then on, Hurrem's power grew. She bore the Sultan not one child, but six, a shocking break with tradition, for concubines were allowed only a single son before the Sultan moved on. But Suleiman could not move on. He rejected every rival brought to tempt him. He even composed poetry for her, calling her his moonlight, his joy, his mischievous queen. The empire whispered that she had bewitched him, that she used sorcery to bind him. But love, whether real or born of ambition, was more dangerous than any spell. Her triumphs reached a height no one dared predict. Against every Ottoman custom, Suleiman married her. It was unthinkable. No sultan before him had ever wed a concubine. The empire trembled at the scandal. A foreign-born slave was now empress, her chambers beside the sultan's own. She was granted the unprecedented title of Haseki Sultan, her influence no longer hidden behind veils, but carved into the very structure of power. And with that power, she began to weave her web. She built alliances through her daughter's marriage to the Grand Vizier. She corresponded with kings abroad, especially the ruler of her homeland. She poured wealth into hospitals, schools, and kitchens for the poor. Her image softened in the public eye, even as her enemies whispered in secret. For behind the charity, behind the poetry, lay something darker, because Hurrem's children had enemies, and one of them, Prince Mustafa, son of Mahidevran, stood as the greatest threat of all. Handsome, courageous, adored by the army, he was beloved as the future sultan, but to Hurrem he was a danger that could never be ignored. For in the brutal law of Ottoman succession, only one son could survive, and she would not allow it to be him. Subscribe if you want to see more of these haunting tales of love, power, and blood, because the story of Hurrem Sultan is far from over, and what comes next will plunge us into betrayal so deep that even the walls of the empire would weep. Prince Mustafa, to the empire, he was hope itself, the strong heir who would one day take his father's throne. To the soldiers, he was a leader they adored. But to Hurrem Sultan, he was a death sentence waiting to fall on her sons. The Ottoman throne was not inherited with peace. It was seized with blood. Brothers turned against brothers, sons against fathers, all in a deadly race to rule. Hurrem knew that if Mustafa inherited, her own children would not live to see another dawn, and so she moved to ensure that day never came. Her most powerful weapon was not the sword, but influence. Through her daughter's marriage to Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha, she gained an ally at the very center of imperial power. Together, they fed the Sultan whispers, carefully crafted seeds of doubt. Mustafa was too popular, too ambitious, perhaps even plotting rebellion. Slowly, poison turned to certainty. By the time Suleiman marched east for his Persian campaign, suspicion had hardened into fear. Mustafa heard the rumors. He heard that his father doubted him, that whispers of treason hung over his name. Desperate to clear himself, he rode into his father's camp, straight into the lion's den. But what awaited him was not reconciliation. As he entered the tent, guards seized him. The young prince, once adored by all, was strangled before he could even speak. And Suleiman, once the magnificent conqueror, stood watching, silent, cold, unmoved. The empire reeled. Soldiers wept openly. The people whispered in grief. Their beloved prince was gone, and all eyes turned toward Hurrem. Had she orchestrated this? Had she condemned a son not her own, just to protect her children? Many believed it. Her name, once spoken with awe, now carried fear. She had triumphed, but the price was blood that could never be washed away. Her own family soon began to unravel. Her youngest son, Cihangir, fragile in health, died not long after Mustafa's execution. Some said from grief too great to bear. Now only two sons remained, Selim and Bayezid. Both desired the throne. Both knew only one could live. The curse of Ottoman succession, the very fate Hurrem had sought to control, now turned inward upon her own blood. By her early 50s, years of stress, betrayal, and loss had hollowed her spirit. Once a slave, once an empress, she had fought every step to secure her family's future. But the cost weighed heavily. In 1558, as her body failed, Suleiman kept vigil beside her, the conqueror of empires, powerless before death. When Hurrem breathed her last, she was laid to rest in a grand mausoleum beside the Suleimania Mosque, forever close to the man she had enthralled, ensnared, and perhaps destroyed. But even death could not quiet the storm she had unleashed. Bayezid rose against his father, only to be executed. Selim became sultan, just as Hurrem had hoped, but his reign was marked by indulgence and decline. The empire she had reshaped teetered, and the shadow of her ambition lingered for a century. They called it the Sultanate of Women, an age when mothers and wives wielded power in ways unseen before. But beneath the beauty of its mosques, beneath the poetry and silk, there was always the echo of chains and the memory of blood. Suleiman lived 8 years after Hurrem's death. The man who had once bathed in golden luxury now wore plain robes, ate from earthen bowls, and withdrew from joy. His victories grew hollow. His court whispered that he had left his soul in her tomb, and when at last he died in 1566, he was laid beside her. Two lovers entwined in death, as they had been in life, an emperor and a slave, bound by love, ambition, and tragedy. History remembers Hurrem Sultan with a divided voice. To some, she was a heroine of courage, brilliance, and devotion to her children. To others, she was the destroyer of princes, a woman whose ambition left a trail of corpses. But one truth cannot be denied. She changed the empire forever. She turned chains into a crown, and her laughter into a weapon sharper than any blade. Her tale asks a haunting question. Was she a mother protecting her children, or a queen blinded by ambition? Tell me, what do you think? Was Hurrem Sultan a victim of her world, or the architect of her own dark empire? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your take.